Marisha here, and I've mentioned in the past that London has myriad free things on offer to see and do. And so I thought I'd do a series talking about some of those things in depth. Today I'm going to be talking about what I would call the Big Eight. These are the large, really top tier museums that are on offer in London, and they all are free general admission. Now, they might have a special exhibit on that you have to buy a ticket to go see. But because they are so big and so, like I said, top tier, like well done, it's really easy to just ignore the special exhibits and go in with your free entry and spend, 2 hours to half a day to even a full day, depending on kind of what your interests are and how you personally approach museums, and enjoy yourself for free. So, I'm going to be talking about them geographically because many of them sort of fall in clusters around each other. And so, it makes sense if you are in London for a short time and you're trying to maximize your time to plan your day around, like, okay, we'll go to this cluster of museums on this day because they're right by each other. So I'm going to start with the Tates, Tate Britain and Tate Modern. Now, these are located on the Thames River. Tate Modern is on the south bank, Tate Britain is on the north, a little bit further west. They're not right across from each other, but they're easy to access from one to the other, either by tube or what I would recommend is to take a ferry. So, London, you may not know that London transportation also includes ferries. And so you can buy for about the same price as what it would cost to take the tube, a ticket to take a ferry from, one dock on the Thames to another, again, depending on the distance. And so it's a fun little excursion between the two. It's great to get out on the Thames because then you also get a view of, the skyline and can maybe get some good pictures if the weather is nice. Tate Britain is more traditional artworks. It's going to be the older artworks. They have a lot of landscapes by J.W. Turner, who is a really famous British painter. I think his portrait is currently on the back of their 20-pound note. But they have also, for me personally, what I like about Tate Britain, they have a lot of works by the Pre-Raphaelites and also my favorite artist, Lawrence Alma Tadema, who is technically from the academic school but is Pre-Raphaelite adjacent, I would say. The building itself is really beautiful. They have a beautiful spiral staircase. It's just architecturally interesting as well. Tate Modern, as the name suggests, is where you're going to find modern artworks. For me, because I'm not a huge modern art fan, it's probably my least favorite of the big eight. But obviously, taste is subjective. If you're really into modern art, you will love Tate Modern. And even I enjoy going there. It's not like I don't like it. It's just if I'm ranking. So it's a really big complex. There's actually two wings. And again, it's where you're going to see like 20th and 21st century artworks. Moving on, I'm going to talk about what I'm calling the Kensington Triad. And that is because it's located in the borough of Kensington. There are three museums that are right next to each other, like boom, boom, boom. They are the Science Museum, the Natural History Museum, and the Victoria and Albert Museum. Science Museum, pretty self-explanatory. You'll be able to see things about volcanoes and dinosaurs and all sorts of aspects of science, space, and they have a section on sort of like industrialization and technology. I will say that for the Science Museum, they have a really good gift shop. So, particularly if you have children or nibblings, like kids that you want to buy gifts for, um, you should be able to find something that's like kind of like a fun educational gift for the child in your life. Not that they don't also have things that grown-ups would enjoy. Natural History Museum, again, kind of self-explanatory. It's really famous for having a skeleton of a blue whale hanging in its foyer. And then all the things that you would expect from a natural history museum, lots of information about evolution and various animals, and getting a chance to see sort of like taxidermied animals and animal skeletons. And but I think they also have a room that has a lot of like rocks and gemstones and things. So if you want to get your Mohs scale on, you can. I feel like their gift shop was maybe not as impressive as I had hoped. Now, I didn't intend to get super into gift shops and cafes and stuff, but I am going to mention them because I know that some people like that is something that they care about when they're visiting museums. So I'm going to try to do my best to inform you about the gift shop and the eating situations. Eating, I think I can really only say with certainty about one of the museums um, what the eating situation is, other than the fact that all of them do have a cafe. Like there is food available if you're really strapped for that. But on that subject, I would say that one of the great things about them being free museums is it's really easy to come and go. So if you wanted to like go for a couple of hours and then you're hungry and you're like, I don't want to eat in this cafe. I want to go get like, real food or like sit down at a restaurant. It's really easy to leave, find something nearby, and then re-enter without worrying about, oh, did I lose my ticket or do I have to pay for another ticket for re-entry? So that's, I think, one of the other advantages of free admission to museums. And then the third museum in the Kensington Triad is the Victoria and Albert, and that would be my favorite of the triad because that's more of a cultural history museum and it's actually very eclectic. I would say that of all the museums that I'm going to be talking about, Victoria and Albert is the most Catholic, Catholic with a small c, in that I think that there's something for everyone to be interested in. So um, they have some rooms that are set up and furnished from like the 1700s, so you can see that kind of historical stuff. But they also have a section that's really modern and it talks about 20th century technology and 20th century design. They have a section that is all about fashion and it kind of tracks fashion throughout all of the decades from, I would say, maybe Victorian era up through like the 80s or 90s at least. Um, they have some artworks. It really is just a very eclectic mix. If I remember correctly, there's even an entire room up on like the highest floor that's like all ceramics. Um, so Victoria and Albert is one that I would recommend if you are a party of people who have varied interests. Obviously, when we're talking about the Tates, if you're not into art, you're not going to want to go to the Tates. If you're not a big science fan, you might not be interested in the Science Museum, but I think that Victoria and Albert has something for everyone. Moving on, again, this next cluster. It's two museums that are both art museums. That's the National Gallery and the National Portrait Gallery. They're in Trafalgar Square, which is a fun sojourn anyway because Trafalgar Square is really famous. You have Nelson's Column, you have the lion statues and the fountains, and so particularly if it's a nice day, it's a really nice area to kind of walk around. And then right there on Trafalgar Square, you have the National Gallery, which is huge. And you have the National Portrait Gallery, which doesn't seem as huge because externally the building doesn't look very big, but it's tall. I think it's like 5 stories of art. So just those two in one day, I think could fill your whole day. Again, it's a lot more classical art, although I think the both of them span everything, right? So the Tates tend to be more focused on particular time periods, whereas the National Gallery, National Portrait Gallery, I think tend to span Middle Ages to like 21st century. Um, Probably not as much 21st century stuff, particularly in the National Gallery, but certainly I know in the National Portrait Gallery, they do have portraits of current famous people, photograph portraits. So gallery is going to be, landscapes, still lifes, some portraits. If you're an American and you're feeling particularly patriotic, there is a portrait of George Washington there, which, one of my friends was kind of surprised. We were in another part of London. There was a statue of George Washington. She found that odd because we think of George Washington as like kind of like the ultimate traitor against the British in the Revolutionary War. But what you need to remember is that prior to that, he was a general in the British War, and he served in what we would call the French and Indian War, but was more broadly the 7 Years' War. So he is a part of British history as well. Just a little fun history tangent there for you. Um, and then the National Gallery will again have some like special exhibits. Right now they have a Van Gogh exhibit on. So you tend to get, I think for their special exhibits, it tends to be like 20th century art. Um, and then the National Portrait Gallery, as you would guess, is all portraits. And there are a lot of them, and it's actually really interesting. Even if you're not like if you're super art fan, I think I think there's enough interesting stuff there because you get to read the biographies of some of the people and learn about some really fascinating people like Charles II's mistress. What was her name? Fanny something. It was like this famous actress. And so reading about her was just really fascinating. But again, I understand if you're not into art, then you might want to skip these. Now, the last of the big eight is kind of by itself because there aren't big museums right next to it. You can walk there from Trafalgar Square in about 20 to 30 minutes. So if you are someone who is wants to have like a really really long day and you're maybe also someone who breezes through museums, then you could tack it on to the Trafalgar Square museums, but my recommendation is that you set aside a day just for this museum alone, and that is the British Museum. Now, I did do a video about membership at the British Museum, so if that's interesting to you, you can check that out, but I would not recommend that to people who are just in town for like a trip, like tourists. It really, membership would be if you are living in London. But the British Museum, and I know that it's controversial because of how some of its things were procured. And I'm not going to get into all of that except to say that clearly I fall down on the side of see the things that you can while they're free to see, right? Like, I can't do anything about anything else, but I can go see the Rosetta Stone and not be charged a fee to see it. So I'm going to. The British Museum is huge. You can spend the whole day there and not see everything. I once spent 5 hours in the British Museum without seeing everything. Um, it is mostly like it's a history museum, but cultural history, and it has artifacts from, all different time eras as well as different geographic eras. And it tends to be laid out by geography. So there's a section on ancient Sumeria and Assyria. There's an ancient Egypt section. There's actually a couple ancient Egypt sections. There's one on the ground floor and there's one on the second floor, or first floor if you're British. There's ancient Greece, ancient Rome. There's a section for the Americas, and that tends to be split up into like North and South, and Pacific Islanders, Oceania, Africa. Um, there's a Japan section, a China section, a Korea section. So if any part of the world that you're interested in, you can go to that section and see artifacts and learn about the people and places in that part of the world. And that's one of the great things about the British Museum is that it does bring all of it together in one place so that you can learn about all of it. It's not a specialized like niche thing, right? It's great when you go to a country and you go to the National Museum and you learn about that country, right? That is a wonderful educational thing. But it is also wonderful to give people the opportunity to go to one place and learn about myriad cultures. And that's what I like about the British Museum. And this is one where I can talk about not just the gift shop, but also the cafes. So, gift shops, tremendous, especially if you like books. There are tons of books on all sorts of different topics, books for kids, books for adults. And then beyond that, lots of great gift options for anybody in your life. Lots of great children's options, lots of things that are tied directly to the museum, but also plenty of things that are sort of more just like London or Britain kind of things. If you want to get Christmas ornaments or jewelry or tins of cookies or whatever, you can find it there at the British Museum gift shops. And then for eating, there are a lot of options. So I would say, I think in all of the other museums, you're basically looking at one cafe. British Museum has a couple of cafes that are, you just kind of walk up and you grab a sandwich and a drink and you pay and then you sit at some tables. But there's also a pizzeria and a fancier restaurant upstairs if you want like to sit down and have kind of more fine dining experience. So there's a good variety of types of food that are available and also a good range to meet like your budget. Because there's also, I just remembered, in the courtyard outside of the museum. So you go in the gates and you go through security, and there's kind of like a courtyard, and you go up the steps to go into the museum. In the courtyard, there's also usually a food truck selling like hot dogs and stuff. So again, lots of options. It really is, more than any of the other museums, an easy place to spend the whole day and be kind of taken care of. Those are the big eight. Those are the things that you're going to find, I think, in any tour guide book of London. There's a reason for that. I know that there are people who travel who like to do more off the beaten things and want to try to avoid places where there's going to be lots of tourists. And I will have videos coming up of some of the free things that are a little bit lesser known. But there's a reason that these are well known and are popular, because they are superb museums. You're talking about like state of the art facilities and the opportunity to see priceless works of art and really important historical artifacts. So, if you're someone who typically is trying to avoid the crowds, um, I would say brave the crowds for these. And again, I will be back with some other lesser known museums on one of my posts, and then some other things that are free, like events and things like that. In the meantime, like, subscribe, tell your friends how gnarly this channel is, and I'll see you next time.